It is Saturday evening on February the 3rd, and we're sitting here with Mr. Kaleb Jacob. He is the chair of the New Boston Taxpayer Association. And we thought we would record a few ideas and comments from Kaleb about how he grew up, where he's coming from, when did he move to town, and his vision for the taxpayer group and why he does what he does. So Kaleb, how are you this evening?
I'm great, how are you?
Doing pretty good. So Kaleb, let's start with just some basic background information. You grew up in Maine, is that correct? Could you tell us a little bit about how you grew up?
Oh, so I grew up in a small farm town. I worked for a lot of farmers when I was a kid, since the time I was about 9 years old. I cut, split, or stacked wood at least 12 months out of the year. Because the only peat source we had was a wood stove and an old farmhouse. I lived in a farmhouse that was built in the early 1800s in Massachusetts. Then Maine became a state, and then it ended up being my house in Maine. But I learned what a day's work was from a farmer, and I worked for a lot of them. It wasn't 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, with scheduled breaks. It was until the work got done. Sometimes the tractor was waiting for me when I was 10 years old at 6 o'clock in the morning. We never took anything to town to fix it. We rebuilt engines on farm haul engines and tractors, and we always did things, ourselves that way with our hands. So
self-sufficiency and hard work and determination was instilled in you as a young child.
Yeah, my town was about 1,900 people. We had a mill that employed about 300 people, it was everybody knew everybody.
What was the name of the town?
Corinna.
Corinna?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. And did you have any siblings growing up?
I did not.
You were a spoiled only child?
I lost out on anything because I had a friend next door that I grew up with.
Oh, cool. Excellent. Tell us a little more about what life was like. You said it was a small town.
Yep.
What else could you tell us about where you grew up?
Our town had everything. For a town of 1,900 people at the time, like I said, it had a mill. But it had a Western Auto. They had Davis Supply, which was like a small Home Depot. If they didn't have it, they could get it. We had a general store. We had 3 gas stations in town. There really were people that had lived their entire lives in Corinna and had never left. Huh. Newport was the next biggest town over. Dexter was the next one over from there. They were all mill towns. Dexter was Dexter Shoe. Eventually that all kind of disappeared. There was a Superfund cleanup after the mill disappeared, and the town is a lot different now. I think it has more people, but it's a pass-through type of a town. It's kind of like an old Route 66, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about some of the jobs that you had growing up?
Oh boy. So in addition to farming, I worked at a gas station when I was in high school, which was great because I could work on my car. I had my first real job after that was working at a pollution plant. Right out of high school, so I was a maintenance technician. I got to let's just say that was an interesting job. Then I got into radio advertising. I sold new cars, a lot of different jobs. At one point, someone told me, it was a guidance counselor that said, you have to go to school to be a police officer, because that's what I said I wanted to do. I thought, I think I'm just going to be persistent on this one, and I started bugging the chief deputy at Penobscot County Sheriff's Department for over a year. He finally just said, all right, I'll give you a job. It was a crappy job at first. And I worked my way up to patrol deputy, where we had 72 towns and territories and 1 Indian reservation in Penobscot County. It was solo county patrol, and threw the keys to me for a cruiser and said, don't shoot anybody and don't drive too fast. So that was a great job. I loved it. It was one of the best jobs I ever had. I really got to know the community. I got to understand people from a different perspective when they're at their worst. So you kind of become a doctor, a psychologist, and all that at a really early age. In addition to that, I was the town constable, so I was on call basically 24/7 for both departments for a few years. As I started to work with people, I found that some of my crimes are getting solved because they would come to me, and law enforcement wasn't something that they would normally trust. But I would extend that, and found that really worked.
So like that's community policing, isn't that what they called it?
Yeah. Back then it was, I was given a directive from our chief, which was, I want to see that brown car with a star on the side on all the dirt roads. I want to see it never in the same place at the same time. Try to avoid the interstate if you can. And back then we didn't have cell phones, so we get a call over the radio that says this can't go over the air. We would go find a store, a general store in like Bradford or wherever, ask to borrow the phone, which was very common up there. We didn't have laptops. We wrote all our reports by hand. They transcribed them later.
Wow.
It was like everything was black and white. So.
Could you tell us like a funny, interesting, or scary story from policing?
There are so many. One was, I said Bradford, and it actually was in Bradford where this happened. Got a call. I was probably 6 or 7 towns away, which again was common. But there was a burglary in progress at this store. So there's only one store in town. It was one of the stores. I used the phone all the time. So as it turned out, as I'm getting closer, there's more information coming over. A witness said that after the store was closed, they saw someone inside. So I get there, and I realize the man is locked inside the store because he was a customer that was out back, and they locked the store on him. They had a movie thing back there behind like a beaded curtain. So, and of course, when the reporter called me, they asked, what kind of a movie was he renting? No comment.
Like a peep show kind of movie?
But he was trapped inside because they locked him up.
Oh, no. Pretty funny. All right, and so at some point you decided to move from Maine to New Hampshire.
But I met a girl, and I'm married. I've been married to her for 20 years. I have a 14-year-old boy and an 18-year-old girl. That's been great. I followed her to New Hampshire, and that's why I moved. It was because I met Amy, and it's been great ever since.
And what year was that you moved?
That was, yeah, that was 1996.
Okay.
1996.
You mentioned that you have 2 great kids.
Yep.
But you also have some pets. What kind of pets do you have?
Well, I've got this wacky golden retriever here that won't leave me alone during this interview. I talked to him earlier, and he said he would leave me alone, but he can't help it. He's almost 2, and his mother is around here somewhere. She's sleeping on the couch. Great dogs. And I have 2 cats. One's a coon cat, Maine coon cat.
Cool.
Yeah.
And which you like better, dogs or cats?
Well, our dogs have really enriched our lives. I never had been a dog person. They're really growing on me, and I just love them to death. But I am and have always been a cat person.
Well, you have a Maine Coon. That's a pretty big cat.
He is a big cat. Looks exactly like the cat I had when I was a kid on the farm. Her name was Lola. His name is Chewy. He lives up to that reputation. He chews pretty much everything: wires, chargers, wires under the bed.
And your current occupation now, do you still work in law enforcement?
Nope, I hung that up. It got to a point where I'd been in that for almost 15 years part-time, and my business was really kind of booming, and it took a lot of on-call, so that would be like a 2 o'clock in the morning call where I have to get up and go in and suit up and all that. That just got to a point where it was interfering with my business, and my business was growing, employees were coming in.
What kind of business do you have?
I own an IT company, an IT firm. Yeah, we have a location up in Maine and Scarborough and one in Bedford.
Excellent. What kind of things do you do for fun?
Well, I like everything outdoors. I like the snowmobile, ATV, hunt, fish, pretty much anything outdoors. 4 years ago, I got my Maine Guides license, so I'm registered in, there's 5 classifications of that. 2 are saltwater. I avoided that. But I do recreational hunting and fishing guiding. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a retirement thing, if that ever happens. I do about 1 paid guided trip a year, and eventually I'd like to do more of it.
Very cool. And there's a lot of testing involved with becoming a Maine guide.
It's not an easy thing to do. Look it up.
So you like technology and you also like the outdoors. How do you reconcile those 2 things together? One is in front of a keyboard, and one is away from everything.
Yeah. So there's a lot of IT people that they have lava lamps, and they have Star Wars action figures on their desk and all that. So I'm kind of a hybrid. I really like technology. Obviously, when I was a kid, we had rotary phones, and we had manual TVs. You had to click the thing on. You had to walk up. The remote control was me because I was the smallest one in the house. So it got to a point where the technology, as it kind of exploded, it was really interesting to me, and it still is. It is a business that it changes every month. It changes on on the next piece of spyware that comes out. I need to balance my brain on the other side of things where I can kind of relax, and I've always found that to be very important. And on the weekends when I go to camp, we have a camp up in Jackman, Maine on the mountain. I don't check my email most of the time, as long as I have someone on call. I avoid it, and there's a rhythm of the forest. You know, when I get out there, sometimes I'll hike to a pond with a canoe on my back for a mile. And when you get into it long enough, you can actually kind of feel it. If there's a mayfly hatch, for instance, when I'm trout fishing, there's a hum. They actually make a hum. And you wouldn't know that if you're in the rat race, and it takes a while to kind of wind down to hear that. It's kind of like the Force in Star Wars, but I'm really all about that.
Reconnecting with nature.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun.
And to get away from politics, too. Had to throw that in there.
Speaking of politics, where do you stand, like, on the political spectrum?
So, I don't identify with any political party. I used to, but it left me. And quite honestly, I feel that both parties have really been disappointing in one way or another. I'm a conservative person. I'm hardworking. I'm compassionate. I care about people that need things. I'd like to, help, people privately sometimes. But for the most part, I feel like the government should be common sense, and run by people like us that are actually the taxpayers.
So you've been active in New Boston's town politics. People have tried to paint you with one brush or another. If you could speak to us from your heart, what are you trying to accomplish in the town of New Boston where you call home?
That's a loaded question. So, first of all, I have to make it clear, I hate politics. I don't like it. I feel that it's been a calling for me to do what I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm going to get some huge benefit or a payout for this, what I'm doing. There's a tax on my family for it. I'm lucky that my wife has allowed me to do this, There have been years past where, that hasn't worked so well. But I have to say, why am I doing that? Well, I mean, the simple question is I watch my taxes go up and up and up, right? And then I kind of, like, okay, that's okay, I guess. I don't know what they need it for, but I would listen to other people talk about it. And then the social media thing kind of came into it. I didn't start the spark. It wasn't me. It was actually a guy named Bill. I'm not using his last name because I didn't get his permission. I didn't think that far ahead here. But when he put that on Facebook about 2 years ago, to me it was like a calling. It was like, I need to do this.
All right, do you have any parting thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
We handpicked this town, okay? And I grew up in a town like this that was actually much smaller, but it was that quaint little New England town, the steeple, the river. There's so much good about this town that we liked. And when we lived in Goffstown, it was that town that was just a little bit too far away. We didn't want to be in here because it would be like 10 miles to get our gallon of milk. So it was a hard place to get to. And then we got to thinking, it's kind of nice to be somewhere where it's hard to get to. And the first few years I lived in this town, if there was a sticker that says I love my town, I would have been on my truck. The other one would be Mainer in Exile. But we handpicked it. We cherry-picked this town. We really wanted to be here. And somewhere in the last few years, that's disappeared. We wanted to live our retirement out here, and that just doesn't seem as possible anymore. I'm actually really concerned about the people who live here all their lives, because that was their plan too. There's a lot of townies here that just can't hang on to this dream of living here because of the rise in taxes. I don't know how we can stop it, but if there's anything I can do to help that happen, I want to do that.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for your time tonight, Kaleb, and for all that you do to try to make a difference.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, thank you.